Getting you some breaking news now, an important one at that. Remember, I told you we have been standing by for the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's address in Sri Lanka as the island nation is in turmoil. Now, in fact, this is coming from Sri Lanka that President has mentioned that he will go ahead and appoint a new Prime Minister in Sri Lanka within the week. So addressing the nation, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa said that he will be appointing a new Prime Minister and a cabinet this week itself. My colleague Srinjoy Chaudhary now joins me on the broadcast. Srinjoy, Sri Lanka is on the boil. We had been waiting for this particular address by the President. However, it is his ouster that is also being demanded by the people who are protesting for weeks now.
Undoubtedly, the important point here is that yes, he will appoint a prime minister. It used to be his elder brother, who was also the president once upon a time. He will appoint a cabinet. But the question is, will the protests actually end? He has started with an emergency, after which he said there is going to be shoot at sight. Now you cannot go beyond that. Between the shoot and sight and the emergency, there was a curfew. Now, clearly, there is shoot at sight. Now, after that, what else can any government do? What else can soldiers of a country do against its own civilians? Now, that is really a question. Now, we will have to see what happens after the Prime Minister is named and after the cabinet is named. Will the people, the protesters, change their minds and say, okay, let's give these people a chance? That's the important thing, because at this point, there is no food, there is no medicine in the hospitals, there is no fuel, there is no electricity. The country is really at a standstill.
Srinjoy, who is the obvious front-runner when it comes to this particular position? Because we have been talking about how the Rajapaksas have brought a country to its doom, and this is what the protest really stems from. The five brothers bringing the entire democracy to its doom. Very first time after the independence has Sri Lanka seen a situation like this. So who are we looking at as the next Prime Minister of Sri Lanka?
The important thing to see is if Gotabaya Rajapaksa reaches out to the opposition. Now, if he does reach out to the opposition, to people like Ranil and so on, the question is, will they agree? Will they agree to take on the responsibility at this time? Or will they feel that it's like a poison chalice? Because if they take on the responsibility, then they are within the government. And they have to solve the problems of the government. They cannot wait for Rajapaksas to fail and then take over. So that's a very difficult situation for the opposition. One, will Gotabaya Rajapaksa ask the opposition? Second, if he does, will they accept? Otherwise, who are the alternatives? Will it be someone from his party? Now, as it happens, we started with 4 or 5 Rajapaksas. Now we are down to only one. So this is the president himself. Will he turn to one of his relatives? Will he turn to one of his party men? Will he turn to an outsider? So these are questions that will have to be answered. If it is the opposition, will the opposition accept?
Right. Right, absolutely. Srinjoy, thank you so much for actually joining us with that very, very important update as President of Sri Lanka, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has announced that he, in fact, will be appointing a new Prime Minister to the island nation and also a cabinet within this week. However, this particular announcement has really come after a warning by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, where the apex bank of the island country has, in fact, said that the Lankan economy will, and I quote here, collapse beyond redemption unless a new government is formed within 2 days to restore political stability. Now, this has happened amid Sri Lanka's central bank chief imposing more capital controls and also threatening to resign if politicians fail to set the stability back to the nation. Now, earlier today, the head of security for the ex-Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, and other officials were summoned by the Crime Investigation Department to record statements in connection with the Monday violence as well. So all these developments are happening in the island nation. The most important one has just about happened with that address that we have been talking about of the president, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He, in fact, decided to address the nation, and he has come out with this statement that Sri Lanka will get a new prime minister and a cabinet within the week. Now, to discuss the situation in Sri Lanka further, I'm joined on the broadcast by two important guests. Mr. Madhavan Narayanan, economist and senior journalist, joins me on the broadcast, and also joining me on Nation Tonight is Professor Rev. W. Wimalaratana, who's the president of Sri Lankan Economic Association and the economics department at the University of Colombo. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me on the broadcast. Mr. Wimalaratana, I will begin with you. What do you actually make of this statement by the president of the country?
Popular agitations are going on requesting to step down of president as well as prime minister. Prime minister, his brother, has already stepped down. Now, still agitations are going on. Popular demand is president should also step down. In the meantime, president announced that he is going to appoint a new prime minister and a cabinet. At the same time, a while ago, he appointed a special commissioner to provide essential service in the island, and two assistant commissioner was also appointed to help the commissioner. Regarding the central bank story, current head of the central bank, governor, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, yes, he was alerting the current situation. We can expect that without a peaceful environment, without a stable government, you cannot run even a normal economy. Here in Sri Lanka, now we have crisis-affected economy. So we need political stability, number one, and also, in addition to that, peaceful environment in the country. Now, both we do not have. He was complaining that if these two goals are not achieved, he would be resigning in 2 to 3 weeks. That we can expect. He was also telling that under whatever governor, these conditions should be satisfied. Otherwise, you cannot achieve the goal of the central bank or goals of the economy. After assuming duties, he has taken some creative decisions, essential decisions rather. He raised the interest rates and decided to control the printing of money, and initiated with the blessing of the government a negotiation with IMF. He spent some time in New York negotiating with IMF. Those are really positive aspect, positive initiatives he involved with. However, he was complaining, now we have achieved some progress as a result of the initiatives taken. We cannot maintain these positive initiatives if peaceful environment is not guaranteed. Number two, if there is no political stability, no government with the prime minister. Yes.
But, I'll just like to bring Mr. Narayanan here. Madhavan, do you think that this was the immediate intervention that was needed, considering that big warning by the central bank? 2 days is what the bank has given. However, a week is what the president is saying. Do you think this is the immediate intervention that's needed to actually probably begin saving Sri Lanka from the kind of turmoil and the economic crisis that it is in currently?
No, I'm afraid, Griha, I have a completely different view on this whole thing. I think it's being made out as if the problem happened only yesterday. It's been on for weeks and months, and both the president and the prime minister are to squarely blame for allowing things to drift beyond control, and then suddenly it is being made out as if political stability is the problem. You're confusing the cause with the effect. The cause is economic crisis and mismanagement and misgovernance. The effect is the protest and the lack of stability. So don't blame the stability that you caused for not being able to solve the problem. So this is what is a harsh indictment, I would say, of the president and the prime minister. And what further proof do you need than the fact that the ruling party goons attacked the protesters and inviting a backlash which caused the prime minister to flee. So it doesn't get worse than this in terms of stability. So the real question to ask is, what did the government do all these days? For a month, even we in India, who are not part of the problem, we are not there. We have felt the Sri Lankan crisis for a month or so. And although there has been mention of the talk with IMF, they are highly preliminary in nature. There is no detail coming out. And IMF has very clearly issued a statement that if the Sri Lankan government, which is heading for a default situation and in a debt crisis, doesn't give assurance that it will not fall into that path again, IMF cannot help. This means that tougher days are ahead for Sri Lanka.
Right.
Because you have to follow austerity measures, you have to tighten your belt. So who's going to be taxed? Who's going to pay the price? What will happen to affordability of essential commodities? A committee has been appointed on essential commodities, but what will they do without the money? Where is the money going to come from? India has given some aid, but so the problem is much more severe than it's being made out to be. And let us be very clear, political instability is the effect and not the cause of the problem. And therefore, President Chandrika Kumaradunga, she was the president earlier, she tweeted that a stage is being set or maybe being set where the protests are not peaceful, and that is used to bring in army rule. If that is the case, it's very serious, although there are not sufficient indications for that. The other question, Srinjoy explained very well.
Absolutely. In fact, Reverend, yes.
Who's going to hold the people?
I'll come back to you. Actually, yeah.
So let me just say one thing.
So I'd just like to actually bring that to Reverend Wimalaratana. Yes. Yes.
I have covered India's economic crisis of 1991 from very close quarters to Business Standard, and I can tell you, India's bureaucracy and economists were ready with the solution in the middle of an election process where Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. And Sri Lanka doesn't seem to have any plan B at all. We had plan A, B, and C ready at that time. There was a crisis. We fixed it. I don't see any sign of that. There's a lot of talking in the air here and there. I'm sorry, but this is the kind of situation that cries out for foreign intervention of some kind or the other.
Right, absolutely. Reverend Wimalaratana, I'll let you have the last word. No plan B. That is what Madhavan has said about the Sri Lankan crisis. This is what we are also seeing on ground, because shoot-on-sight order that was actually given to the military and the police there, to the protesters. And after that, this climbed down and the president really going ahead and addressing the nation, talking about getting the nation a prime minister and a cabinet very, very soon.
Since you have followed the developments in Sri Lanka, until last Monday, we had peaceful demonstrations in Colombo and elsewhere in the country. However, the last regime we had under the leadership of under the leadership of former president and thereafter Prime Minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, he wanted to stay in power somehow or other. He initiated something to chase away those peaceful demonstrators. So that unpleasant situation came thereafter, and peaceful environment disappeared as a result of this unnecessary interference by the former Prime Minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. Well, things went away from the government control. As a result of, perhaps as a last resort, government took these harsh decisions. An irresponsible government would think in that way. So you can expect it to maintain the peaceful environment in the country. Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Reverend Wimalaratana and also Mr. Narayanan, thank you so much for joining us. It's a very, very important conversation that we must continue to have. However, this is the latest development that we are bringing to our viewers as the President, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has addressed the nation, and he, in fact, has promised a new Prime Minister and a cabinet within the week's time. On that note, I'm slipping into a very short break right here on Nation Tonight, but more news and updates coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.